Welcome to this week's video tutorial on working with macros. Macros are programs that can perform repetitive tasks quickly. The macro button is located on the Developer tab of the ribbon. If you do not have a Developer tab, you will need to add it by going to File and then down to Options, Customize Ribbon, and click on Developer, and then click OK. Since opening a workbook that contains a macro could corrupt your computer, security settings need to be in place to allow them to run. Click on the Developer tab and go to Macro Security. Verify that Disable All Macros with Notification is selected. With this notification, you will be able to enable the macro to run manually. Macro programs use a language called Visual Basic for Applications, or VBA. Luckily, Excel contains a macro recorder, which will record steps and automatically write the VBA code. I will record a macro that exports the receipt to a PDF for emailing to the registering parent. To record the macro, click the Record Macro button. A dialog box opens where I can give the macro a name of PDF receipt. In the shortcut key box, I'll type R, so that to run the macro I can simply click on Ctrl R. I want to store the macro in this workbook, and for the description, I'll type created 11/1/2015, save receipt area range A18 to F37 as a PDF file. Once I click OK, the recording begins. So I'll click OK and then begin my steps carefully. I'll first click on A18, Shift, and go to F37. Then on the ribbon, I'll click on the Page Layout tab, Print Area, and Set Print Area. Then I'll click the Page Setup dialog box and click on Header Footer, Custom Header, and in the center section, type Registration Receipt. And then OK, go to Margins, click Center on Page horizontally, and then click OK. Now I'll go to File, down to Export, Create PDF, and I'll give it a file name of Receipt, and then Publish. Then I'll close that receipt, go back and clear the print area, click on the dialog box launcher, go to Header and Footer, Custom Header, and erase Registration Receipt, then click OK, and on the Margins tab, take off horizontally and then click OK. Then I'll go back up to cell A1, and on the Developer tab, click on Stop Recording. So my macro was recorded in those steps. If I make a mistake on any one of the steps, I can stop recording and delete that macro and try again. Now to run the macro that I recorded, I can hit Ctrl R on my keypad and notice that PDF receipt appears. Closing the PDF receipt, I can see that the print area has cleared. However, if I open up the Page Setup dialog box and click on Header and Footer, I still have the header in the center section. This is actually a bug in the macro, and I'll need to edit the code in order to fix the bug. So I'll go to the Developer tab, click on Macros, and with PDF receipt highlighted, I'll click on Edit. What appears is the code behind the macro. To fix the bug, I'm going to remove all the code with print communication false or print communication true. So I'll go through and delete each line that shows this. Once the code is corrected, I don't need to hit Save, but simply exit out of VBA. Now I'll go to the Page Layout tab, click on Header Footer, delete that center section, click OK and OK again, and then hit Ctrl R to rerun the macro. Here I have the receipt, and when I go to the Page Setup dialog box, the header is now removed. So now that my macro works, I'll go ahead and save this file as a macro-enabled workbook, and that saves the macro that I recorded within the workbook. Now let's record a second macro. I'll record a macro to transfer data from the bottom of the worksheet in the transfer area to the registration data worksheet. So I'll go to the Developer tab and click on Record Macro. I'll give it a name of Transfer Data, and I'll use T as the shortcut key. The description will read, created November 1st, 2015, copy values in the transfer area in the receipt worksheet to the registration data worksheet. Then I'll hit OK to begin recording. My first step is to click on the registration data sheet, click on the Review tab, and unprotect the sheet. Then I'll click on the Receipt sheet, select the range A40 to F40, click on the Home tab and select Copy, then click on the Registration Sheet tab, make sure A1 is selected, and then the Control down arrow to go to the last row with values. Then I'll go to the Developer tab, I'll click Use Relative References to go one down from the last row, and I'll click the down arrow. Then I'll toggle off of Use Relative References. Click on the Home tab, click the Paste down arrow, and paste values. Then click on cell A1, go to the Review tab, protect the sheet, and click OK. Then click on the Receipt sheet and go up to B3. Then I'll stop recording. Now I'll test the macro by entering data into the registration sheet and hitting Control T to transfer it. So all my data is entered, and I'll hit Control T. Then I'll click on Registration Data to ensure that the data was entered on the last row. Yes, it was, and the sheet is protected. Lastly, I'll create macro buttons for these two macros so the user doesn't need to remember the shortcut key. On the Developer tab, I'll go to Insert and select the form control of Button. Then I'll go down to A14, click and drag my box down to A16. A dialog box appears where I can select the macro of PDF Receipt and then click OK. On the macro, I'll replace button 2 with Create PDF Receipt. Then I'll do the same for transfer data. Go to Insert, Button, create my button in B14 to B16, select the Transfer Data macro, click OK, and in the box, type Transfer Data. Now let's test the buttons. In B3, I'll enter data 12/3/2016, NOAA, and the rest of the data. Now let's test our buttons. First, create PDF receipt, and second, transfer data. I'll go to registration data to make sure that NOAA was entered, and it was on line 5. This concludes the video tutorial on creating macros. Macros can perform a multiple series of tasks easily with simply a click of the button.